Welcome to the Trip Leader podcast series. I'm your host, Eli Corey, and today I'm in beautiful New York City, which is a great place to be in the summer, coming back from an international trip, and I'm sitting down with Kevin Marungi, the Director of Global Journeys at the Avenue School of New York. Kevin has a really interesting global background and domestic background in the United States, with experience in many organizations, Washington, D.C., New York, and just really fortunate to have him with us today. For those of you listening that are part of the Global Education Benchmark Group, his school is a member organization of that group, and he attends the conference each year. I had a chance to meet him earlier this year in Atlanta, and he agreed to have a podcast session with us. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Eli. It's a pleasure.
Of course. And I'm happy I can catch you on this sort of long layover that I have today.
Yeah, no, it's exciting that you get to do all this travel for what is really important work, so kudos to you.
I love this podcast because these resources that you work on and that other schools within the GEBG work on are largely in type, and they're very informative, but it's nice to have this audio session once a month because it's a free podcast to where anyone can kind of get it on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and listen to guys like you on their 30-minute commute to work on a Monday. So it's super fun. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of it.
Of course.
So I want to take it from the very beginning and tell our listeners a little bit about your background. You're from Nairobi originally.
Yes, I am.
And you studied where there?
St. Mary's School, Nairobi.
Okay, awesome.
And I was there all the way from first grade to 12th grade to International Baccalaureate 2-year program after 12th grade. So not typical, but I spent many years at St. Mary's School, Nairobi. Great school.
I believe it. Nairobi is a great city. I have one family member there right now.
Oh, excellent.
Yes. She's actually a nun at a convent there. And after Nairobi, what led you to Middlebury College?
So I had parents who valued going abroad for education, international education. They were both in the U.S. for college at a time when that was atypical. My dad was part of this airlift around the independence time, around the state of emergency against the British. The then Senator John F. Kennedy, working with some of our founding politicians back home, created this airlift to the U.S. for young, talented Africans to come here and do their university education and go back home and build our fledgling nation. Barack Obama Sr. was part of that airlift. I found out that my dad was part of it too. So he came here for college. My mom came here to finish her university studies as well. And I think when it was time for us to go to college, they encouraged us to study abroad for our college education.
That's amazing. I'm glad you told me that. And I guess, were you a part of another airlift in the future, or were you just exposed to that international kind of education feel, and you felt like you wanted to study in the United States?
I think inspired by my parents and also inspired by my siblings, who I'm the youngest,
okay.
And my 3 siblings were in the U.S. or had come to the U.S. for college. My brother, especially, was in the New England small college family. He had a good sense of what colleges to apply to, that valued having international students on campus, and very importantly, were generous with their financial aid. So it was a less structured airlift than, this government-implemented one around Independence time, but it was part of kind of a movement of young Kenyans, young Africans choosing to study abroad because of certain issues back home. The colleges, the universities are very tied into the political scene back home, and whenever there was political unrest, the kids were in the streets rioting. Like, you could go to the University of Nairobi for a 4-year degree and still be working on it 8 years later because the universities were closed so often due to unrest.
Wow.
And it was difficult to get in. At the time, it was maybe 4 public universities for a country full of graduating seniors.
Oh, my goodness. And how long did it take you from your undergraduate studies or graduate studies to start getting involved with global projects?
I think there was almost a family orientation towards global education, and for me, human rights education. So I actually initially came here believing I was going to be a biology major.
Oh,
And I took an ecology class that first semester, great class. Had really long labs, 3-hour labs, and met at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's funny how these little things end up determining or helping to determine your course. And then I took this comparative politics class as well that first semester, and really enjoyed it and just got interested in international relations, and decided to kind of switch my major to political science with a minor in economics. And I think that academic interest, and then after my undergraduate degree, working for an organization in New York, a youth development education organization, those factors, I think, ended up combining my interest in working with young people and my interest in international affairs, and led me to the career that I have today.
it seems like the perfect crossroads, especially with the background with your family.
Exactly.
And everything that everyone's done. Just to touch on the science, you're talking to a guy who took geology and astronomy, and just to get away from chemistry and biology. So I get it. I couldn't do it, and the 3-hour labs weren't for me either. What was the first human rights issue that you really kind of honed in on?
So, contextually, the country that I grew up in, I grew up in a Kenya that was basically illiberal democracy, a dictatorship under the guise of democracy. And, I was acutely aware that there was this class of elite power grabbers at the helm of the country, and, just had a sense of the injustice around that, and kind of growing up in a situation where it was hazardous to your health to speak ill of the president, and having a sister who is an international human rights lawyer, another sister who works at the UN. My late sister was LGBTQ rights filmmaker. It was almost something genetic that I just found this interest in working against injustice. And I grew up in a society that had rampant social stratification, rampant inequality, and rampant injustice. So I think for that reason, I gravitated towards that. And then coming to this country and engaging with injustices here. For the first time, realizing that I was identified in a certain specific kind of way, and the social injustice that came around that. I mean, for the first time, I was a black man, and
Instead of just a man.
Instead of just a man, and so I think my lived experience further stoked this interest I had in human rights, and eventually in engaging young people around addressing human rights.
And tell me just one of your favorite stories from engaging those young people, because you have such a long history.
So when I was working at Global Kids, not-for-profit global education, human rights education organization, great place to work, great mission. I was there for 10 years. I ran this summer institute, a 3-week internship on foreign policy and international law, hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations, every summer. Every summer we would do a workshop on the Democratic Republic of Congo, and introducing that conflict, the conflict that's been raging in that country for the last 2+ decades, and how they have a stake in it, how these devices that we all have, a major mineral in all our electronic devices, is primarily sourced from the Democratic Republic of Congo under conflict conditions. And talking to them not only about corporate interests in kind of turning the other way and almost stoking this conflict that's ongoing in the Congo, and all the things around that, rape as a weapon of war, use of child soldiers, but giving them a strong sense of their stake in that, because our demand for these products fuels this conflict.
Consumerism.
Yeah.
and you're in the beacon of it here.
Exactly. You should take a walk up to Hudson Yards. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, just engaging them in that, seeing how invested they got in it, grasping that they have a stake in it and a stake in addressing this issue, and doing a small part. Not giving students the notion that, yeah, after this workshop we're going to end the conflict in the Congo. But you can do your piece. You can hold these corporations accountable. You can speak with, your wallet. We're the ones demanding these products. You can, demand that these companies source their minerals in a ethical, conflict-free way. So always seeing how year to year the students engaged with that issue and got passionate about it. We had a young Congolese gentleman who was an activist for Congo come speak with them every year. Dude, he was brilliant, and he got them so invested in, playing a role in bringing an end to this conflict. He would give them this vision of, in 2030, when he's 50 years old and he goes back to the Congo, and the Congo is conflict-free. How can they help him realize that vision? And seeing what they did after that with the projects that they implemented, I think for me was always really profound. Just watching young people get invested in a global issue.
That's amazing, honestly, and it's a phenomenal story because it's so relevant to our society today. At what point did simply attaining an iPhone become something that was truly destructive to another society? And we live in one that, through affinity and social media, we're not. It's not in our best interest to have things that are negatively impacting us pop up on our timeline. Only ones that positively impact us and ones we show that we have an interest in.
Absolutely.
That's just going to further suppress the demand for those devices.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. So global journeys. What made you want to get into, and I know it's not just international travel, it's probably global education in general, go from the background of Global Kids, Global Tassels, you're still involved as an advisory member, I believe, and get involved with just a ton of student travel. How do you kind of take your background and parlay it into that?
So, at Global Kids, I was kind of doing this work in the context of a human rights education organization. So doing the human rights and international law and foreign policy work, and then also trying to figure out opportunities for the students who attended those programs to travel and interact with their peers around the world on addressing human rights issues. And when I learned about Avenues and this really amazing vision and mission and this world school and the school that had this global citizenship mission and wants to have an impact around the world, the mission spoke to me. And, it was an opportunity to work with a group of young people who have opportunity, who have a certain amount of privilege, and engage them in how they can, using the resources that are available to them, how they can sustainably, ethically, thoughtfully engage the world around them. And with Global Journeys, it provided the exact opportunity to do that, and almost in a way that was backed by the mission of the school.
There's an administrative continued effort to do it anyway, so that's embedded within the fabric of the school.
Absolutely. The flexibility that offers, the cachet that you have as a department, when the work that you're doing is so intrinsically tied to the mission of the school, it was an opportunity that was really exciting, and it's an opportunity that's being borne out by the kind of programs that we're trying to implement for the young people in this school.